Joining me now is Harmeet Dhillon, Vice President of the Republican National Lawyers Association, RNC committeewoman for California, a member of the 2020 Trump Advisory Council. Well, Harmeet, I wrote a column today entitled, The Trump Whistleblower May Not Be a Whistleblower at All. Because if you look at the statute on whistleblower, they're allowed to file a complaint against other people in the intelligence community who may have engaged in misconduct or abuse. President Trump is not a member of the intelligence community, right?
Yep. No, I saw your column. I think it makes a very good point, and there's so much other stuff there. To meet the standards for this statute, there are a number of definitions, a number of thresholds. It has to be a matter of some urgency. What is more likely, Greg, is that this is a partisan effort to undermine the president from the swamp, somebody who's probably leaking and using this as a cover to do so. And we've seen dozens of examples of this in this administration's history. So I'm looking at this accusation with a particularly bleary and jaundiced eye. And I think that Joe Biden and others have much to gain by changing the subject from Kavanaugh, from some of these other issues, and that's what they're doing.
Well, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the president sweeping authority to negotiate with foreign leaders, to make demands, indeed to make promises. It does not grant power to an unelected, inferior employee of the federal government to second guess what the president is doing or approve or disapprove of what he's doing. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And, you know, for one thing, Hunter Biden's deals absolutely should be investigated. It's a disgrace that they weren't. And these people want to have it all different ways. On the one hand, they want the president to go tell Saudi Arabia what to do with its embassy staff on X, Y, or Z issue. And, you know, so it's very much situational ethics for them. But ultimately, it's the president's job under our system of government to communicate with foreign leaders and share his views with them. And I don't see anything problematic with the alleged question. There's no quid pro quo.
Well,
and even if, you know, like there's so many issues uncovered here. So I think you have
setting
to,
aside for the moment that quid pro quo is a standard mechanism of foreign policy negotiations, the Wall Street Journal, as we point out, is reporting there was no quid pro quo.
Right.
What journalists seem to be ignoring is that there was a quid pro quo with Biden and Ukrainian leaders. He is seen on tape bragging about how he threatened them that if they didn't fire a prosecutor, he was going to withhold more than $1 billion in aid to Ukraine. Now, that's a quid pro quo, isn't it? And why is it the media ignores that?
Well, that's a rhetorical question. We know why they're ignoring it. They hate the president, and they are willing to give a pass to anybody who criticizes him, including people who are putting our national security at risk. Who knows what this whistleblower is doing behind the scenes? Whistleblower? I don't know. So let's see what happens.
Here is what Joe Biden had to say. Take a listen.
Not one single credible outlet has given any credibility to his assertion. Not one single one. And so I have no comment except the president should start to be president. Is that an abuse?
Now, what Biden just said is completely untrue. There was a main story by the New York Times which detailed quite a bit of this story involving Joe Biden, his son, and isn't Biden just sort of taking out a page out of the Hillary Clinton playbook and deny it all and say, oh, that's been debunked and nobody believes it?
Of course. I mean, these people are all used to saying whatever they want to the media, lapdogs who will just repeat it and extend it and cover for them, and that's what's going on here. But increasingly, the mainstream media doesn't seem interested in the truth, and even like digging past the analysis here, you're absolutely correct in your column. The president is the head of this entire edifice of national security. He isn't part of it. And so the whole whistleblower idea that anybody who works in the swamp can make a complaint against the president and they get a hearing in Congress over it is silly.
Now, I want to switch topics because you've had a legal victory in your battle against the state of California. I think that's the Golden Gate Bridge or the Bay Bridge behind you. I can't quite tell.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But California, as most people know, passed a law that was clearly aimed at Donald Trump that said you can't be on the primary ballot for president unless you disclose your tax returns. You convinced a judge to place an injunction on that law,
That's
right?
That's right. So not just myself, the president's lawyers were there in court yesterday. I argued with Justin Clark for the RNC, the California Republican Party, and 3 voters. And then Judicial Watch was also part of the number of cases collected there. After 2.5 hours of argument, Greg, we were able to convince the judge that there were potentially numerous grounds to strike this down. So he did issue an injunction from the bench and said he was going to issue a written ruling in the next week or 10 days. And so we'll see what his exact reasoning is. But it's bad news for the governor who signed this, for the legislature that passed it, for the attorney general that defended it, and for the secretary of state that wanted to enforce it. So it is really a TKO by the president and his supporters and voters of California, regardless of political party. The government should not put hurdles between the citizens and candidates. They're not allowed to do that, and only the Constitution sets the qualifications for federal offices.
Yeah, and the Constitution also prohibits a bill of attainder. Now, this may not quite qualify as a bill of attainder, but it's targeted at one individual, Donald Trump, and that also applies to states. They can't target individuals with particular pieces of legislation, especially when a state is infringing upon the federal rules in the Constitution of qualifications for president, right?
That's right. Qualifications. We also talked about the First Amendment and 14th Amendment, equal protection, due process, as well as associational rights of parties. So the parties have a right to select their standard bearer. In this case, the Republican Party is going to select Donald Trump. And for a state to try to interfere with that is outrageous and unconstitutional. And so we're really glad that this judge saw through all of that and that this law is not going to be going into effect by the end of November, which is when the president was going to have to disclose 5 years of his tax returns.
Well, Harmeet Dhillon, congratulations on your legal victory. It was hard fought. It's not easy there in California, and I can see it as the Golden Gate Bridge behind you. I used to live on the other side in Sausalito. So thanks so much.
Beautiful place.
It is.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.